Let me be the first to welcome you to the annual conference of the Regional Network of Strategic Studies Centers. This morning, in our welcome remarks, we're going to try to accomplish three things. First, I see a lot of new faces. So we're going to have an overview of what the regional network is and what it does for those new folks. I think it's also useful for those of us who have been around for a while to be reminded of exactly why we're here. Second thing is, we will be welcomed by our co-hosts for this event, Bulent Aras from SAM and Ambassador James Larocco from the NESA Center. And then finally, we'll go over briefly what you can expect out of this conference over the next 3 days. So that'll be our morning here. So first things first, for our new folks, what is the Regional Network of Strategic Studies Centers? At its core, it's a partnership of institutions that are dedicated to a range of issues, but all of them strategic in nature. They could be political, economic, natural resources, military affairs, but we share a common goal of dealing with issues that affect global security and regional security. This event is a platform to bring all of these various organizations from Morocco to Bangladesh together in one place to cross-pollinate, to share ideas, to share perspectives. There are two main goals of the regional network: sustained strategic engagement and collaborative research. And what do those two things mean? Sustained strategic engagement is simply networking. It is bringing people together who work on similar issues so that they can get to know one another, especially if they're from different parts of the world. They might not otherwise have the opportunity to meet. And we think that one of the best ways to sustain that engagement is through collaborative research. That typically takes the form of the working groups that we have established in the network and that you'll be participating in over the next 3 days. Now, we're very lucky that the network has 5 co-sponsors. Co-sponsors are sort of a board of directors, a group of founders of this network. And those include SAM, our host here from Turkey, the Center for Strategic Studies at the King Abdullah Academy in Jordan, the NESA Center, Near East South Asia Center at the US National Defense University, the National Defense University of Pakistan, and the Institute for Defense Studies and Analyses in India. So we've got a range of institutions from across the region that sponsor this initiative, and then over 30 member institutions that participate in what the network does. So that's a very brief, overly simplistic overview of what the network is. So let me then turn to our hosts so that they can give you a flavor of not only a welcome, but some of their thoughts for what we'll be doing over the next 3 days. So first, our host here in Istanbul, the director of SAM, Professor Bulent Aras.
Thank you, first of all, I'd like to welcome all the guests, and we are really happy and glad to have you all here. The topic, the general theme of the meeting is the world rebalancing. And we were just talking to Ambassador Larocco, and he said, in my past 40 years, I never had a year like the 2011, and even the next year will be, a more busy and intense one. I think what we are facing, we have, global and regional reshuffling, rebalancing. And that emerged due to 3, the challenges, global challenges we are facing in these days. The first challenge is the global political challenges. maybe in a better formulation, global security challenges. And the institutions to deal with this challenge is not good enough in these days. What we have at hand is like the UN Security Council and the UN system itself. As you may have witnessed so far, this is not good enough to deal with the global challenges. And the problem here is, even in the 1990s, the problems were remaining, regional. But now we have no chance to preserve the problems at the regional level. It easily turns out to a global problem. Our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Farruko, in his thinking, he recently talking on this. For example, we had a Georgian Russian crisis in Black Sea. But what happened? This was a problem emerged due to the Georgians' treatment of uprisings badly, and Russia intervened. But what happened? In a week, in a period of a week, in the time frame of a week, that turned out to a crisis between the United States and Russia, even NATO versus Russia in Black Sea. The regional problems, even the interstate problems, can easily turn to the global problems, and we don't have a comprehensive security framework or even a political framework to deal with that kind of problem. We are also facing an economic crisis, which emerged as a financial crisis, but now that's a worldwide economic crisis. And what we had at hand is simply not enough to deal with the crisis. There are attempts like the extending G8 to G20 and create new mechanism, but what already we have at hand is simply not quite good enough to deal with it. We also have the cultural fault lines. Those are creating this international global level problems, and again we do not have the mechanisms to reconcile the differences at the civilizational level or even the sectarian ethnic level at various levels. And this is we are just moving to a period of I have a lot of thinking on how to name the new system, but one thing is for sure that we are facing a decline of hegemony, and we are operating under the premises and the conditions of the decline of hegemony. Most of the regions in the world have going to a period that they will be more on their own. This creates, the challenges and opportunities. There are more room for regional actors to maneuver, but there is no, a hegemonic umbrella that may establish, an order, whether you like or not. And in that sense, the most interesting issue has been, the Arab Spring, and the Arab Spring emerged under the premise of a kind of decline of hegemony. There is no hegemonic order now in the Middle East as we used to have in the 1990s or 1950s or even after the First World War. Now, we are on our own, the Arabs on our own, Kurds are on our own, and all the nations of the Middle East are on their own. And this turned out to, from my perspective, a search for global governance, good governance, a search for good governance, and out of all that, most important, the search for honor and dignity. And Arabs have, at that time, under the premise of, under the conditions of hegemonic decline, they had a chance to reclaim their future, reclaim their governance. And this created an enormous, anxiety, excitement in the region. And the peoples of the region first time have a chance to catch their future, express their identity, establish their own states, and bring societal demands to fore and search for good governance. Of course, this is, runs very well in theory, but in practice, lots of problems, difficulties, etc. And being part of Turkish Minister of Foreign Affairs, what Turkey is doing in this volatile international and regional environment, Turkey presents itself as an order instituting country. And what Turkey is doing to contribute to those global processes, as well as being a constructive role, what's happening in the region right now. And Turkey supports, Arab search for good governance, and tries to help as much as it can. And this order instituting role, Turkey has, a self-confidence that it can play a constructive role, contributing role. And Turkish policymakers believe that they have, certain advantages, privileges, certain, abilities to contribute to the region. And there are, I don't like to talk much, but few, abilities of Turkey. Turkish policymakers believe that Turkey have access to the region. Accessibility is one of the, the most important advantages for Turkey, since Turkey have access to the, all related parties to the developments in the Arab Spring. Turkey has reached to the societies, the governments, as well as the Western partners and the most important security framework, the NATO itself. And Turkey tries to use this, advantage of accessibility to contribute to the ongoing processes. And Turkey's priority is to help those countries to establish political stability, economic development, and once these countries have stability and economic development, then the region will be much more open to, a more liberal mode of cooperation, more prone to, supranational entities, international organizations in the region, as well as the region will be more open to a new psychology of cooperation, political cooperation and cooperation for economic prosperity. Well, we will have much time to talk on the national government's policies and what's going in the region. I'd like to stop here and repeat again, welcome to Istanbul, and I hope this will be a fruitful and open-minded and positive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bulent. Now I'd like to turn the floor over to the NESA Center's Director, Ambassador James Larocco.
Thank you very much, Tyler, and thank you, Professor. I find it interesting that Bulent continues to use the title Professor while he's very much being a diplomat these days. And I use the title Ambassador, but I'm being quite a bit of a professor these days. So we get to move back and forth. Bulent did mention what I said to him about this year, 2011, and it's very true that in my 40 years of work, I've never seen a year quite like 2011. And I must say, so far this year, and I still have more travel, I've traveled over 200,000 kilometers, over 150,000 miles, however you translate that into kilometers. And it's been fascinating. I feel I did the right thing in traveling and seeing things firsthand, talking to people, getting their feelings, their emotions, their fears, their hopes, their dreams, talking to older people, younger people, and believing, as I do, that this is a time of great challenge, but also a time of great opportunity. I often like to say, I served 5 years in China, that they have a wonderful word for crisis in Chinese, which is 2 characters. In Chinese, it's 危机, and the first character means means danger, and the second character means opportunity. And I think this is the situation exactly that we're in today. And 2012, I believe, is going to be an even more important year than 2011. But as we take a look at these important issues over the next day or two, I would like to throw out some ideas, speaking as a professor, that I hope will help guide us as we think through this. First of all, let me talk about the Arab Spring, as it's called. I honestly did not like that title, but at a recent conference in Dubai, I said I didn't like Arab Spring. I thought maybe Middle Eastern transition, and a young Emirati raised his hand and he said, I think Arab Spring is absolutely correct. Here in Dubai, we have 2 weeks of spring and then 8 long hot months of summer. And he said, I think Arab Spring is a good way to look at it. In looking at the Arab Spring, it is now a cliche to say that every country is different, every country is unique, and you need to look at them in that context. And that's true. But in the next 2 days, we're not going to be able to discuss every single country. So I would like to throw out a few ideas that I believe are relevant as we look at what's happening in the Middle East. First, this is not a spring or a revolution or whatever you want to call it. The best way, I think, to think about it is that it is a process. It is a process. That means that the situation in Cairo last week, while very important, was just one step. One step in a long process that may take generations to sort out. There are short-term concerns, short-term needs, short-term demands, short-term crises. But these short-term crises and demands will not determine the ultimate fates of these countries. They will go through a very long period of adjustment. And if we look at it from that context, I think then we should not have as many fears about what's happening today, but also understand that there are different ways of looking at it. And that's my second point about the Arab Spring. I believe the easiest way to understand this is to look at it from the point of view of constituencies. Now, I use that word with American audiences because American audiences understand that. That's what America was built on. The foundation of American democracy by our founding fathers was constituencies, not political parties, constituencies. And I feel very humbled to speak in front of very prominent Egyptian attendees here, but I think looking at Egypt, for example, there are clear constituencies. Now, there's been a lot of focus on the youth, and they are a constituency. But the military is a constituency, as are religious groups a constituency, as is the media is a constituency. And finally, something that near and dear to my heart, as a bureaucrat, the bureaucracy is a constituency. It truly is in Egypt. It's a very strong institution. And bureaucracies tend to resist change. And that's a fact. That's good and it's bad. But it is something that needs to be dealt with. How are the constituencies in Egypt, Tunisia, Syria, Libya, how are they going to adjust? Are they willing to compromise? They must, if democracy is to succeed. Are the young willing to accommodate the fears and concerns of the generations ahead of them. This is going to be a lot of the challenge in all of these countries. And this includes the countries on the Arabian Peninsula as well. They have to accommodate the young, they have to accommodate the religious groups, they have to accommodate the military. Without a strong military, no country is secure. They have to accommodate all the various constituencies that are there. And of course, when you look at constituencies, they break down as well. You can't simply say a religious constituency. There are different types within that. There are some who are more moderate, some who are less moderate. And in many cases, they don't agree with each other. So I think if you take a look at constituencies, it's easier to analyze where these countries may be going and who has to make the most adjustments in the countries and who has to be accommodated that were not accommodated in the past. And that's overall the will of the people, which I think must be taken into account more than ever before in this region. Now, when I take a look at region, I want to go back to something that Bulent said, which is these are global issues, and they are. But I believe primarily they will demand regional solutions. And I think we tend to agree on this, but not completely. But I think in saying this, it's because other countries, whether you say they were hegemonic or simply pushed their interests strongly, are not going to be doing that in the future. And I'll get into that a bit later. But I think we've already seen in 2011 traditional institutions that played a role, like NATO, like the European Union, are less able to make a difference or have their way. And we've seen regional institutions like the Gulf Cooperation Council, like the Arab League, that are in fact playing a stronger role. And that's good. And we have now seen new institutions, if you call it that. For example, the Istanbul process. I thought that was a very good name that was given to the Turkish role related to Afghanistan. A process. That means that it is going somewhere. It's going from here to wherever. But it's not a fixed institution. And I like that idea of building new institutions that may not be rooted in a building or a place, but are rooted in an idea. And I believe that, and I challenge all of you to think about what to do with traditional institutions or the need for new institutions to bring the region forward. If there is to be hope for all of these regions, I believe we need a whole new regional approach to each one. And let me give you some examples. First, I believe there is not going to be any solution, a positive solution, to whether it's regional security in a traditional sense or economic security for the region that we are in today, namely the Mediterranean region, unless we have some new institutions and new approaches. The traditional Mediterranean institutions, I believe, have accomplished very little. And most of these are, in fact, relatively new, whether you talk about the EU-Mediterranean dialogue, the NATO-Mediterranean dialogue, et cetera, et cetera. I believe that Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, all of these countries, there needs to be a new Mediterranean institution that will address the needs of the next generation. A generation that expects more, wants it quickly, too quickly, I believe. Young people feel that way. But without an institution that provides them hope, I think they will become more aggressive, and I think we will see more conflict. I believe a good start for this would be a new Mediterranean economic institution, I have made a proposal to my government, and I have called it MedTide. I call it that because in English we like to say that a high tide, that is when the water rushes in, a high tide raises all boats, not just one, but all boats. And I believe that this new institution should concentrate on trade, investment, and development assistance. That's what TIDE stands for. Stay out of the politics, but address what is necessary in the region in terms of trade, investment, and development. I think trade and investment are relatively clear. Development depends on each country. And development requires capital and requires labor. And I believe labor mobility and capital mobility is going to be essential for the Mediterranean. No Mediterranean country can do it on its own. And that includes Turkey, which is doing quite well. But Turkey is interdependent on this region too. So I believe all of these countries should come together for an institution like this so that all boats can be raised. Otherwise, I believe all boats will fall. No single country has the ability to dig itself out of the economic crisis, and that includes Southern Europe as well. Next, let's move a little bit to the east, and I believe that the idea of a new Silk Road initiative is absolutely vital for Central Asia and South Asia. That will connect Turkey to India, through Central Asia and South Asia, and then India and Turkey to China. This is an area that today has the least trade of any area in the world. It's amazing how little trade occurs in Central Asia and South Asia. The least in the world. And the potential is the strongest. I have seen calculations that indicate that as many as 100 million jobs could be created by this. Now that may sound like an enormous number, but China alone must produce 20 million jobs every year for their population. I remind Americans of that when we talk about we need to create 1 million jobs. China needs to create 20 million every year. So 100 million is not too many, but I believe the prospects of 100 million jobs for the Central Asian states, for Afghanistan, for Pakistan, and for India, and Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, is enormous. And all of this, of course, will raise all boats again together. The Silk Road Initiative, in fact, has a lot of substance to it already, but it requires a tremendous commitment on each government to break down barriers. There is almost no trade between the countries to the east of here. Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, you just go through the whole list. They don't trade, their borders are closed. This is insane, and this must be changed. Next, moving a bit south, is the Arabian Peninsula. The Gulf Cooperation Council needs to look at its own economic future to raise all boats, and I think there's a particular obligation there for Yemen, which has the greatest population and the greatest need. I have sent many letters to my alumni to say that regardless of the change in political leadership in Yemen, the same challenges will face Yemen tomorrow as the day before. And most of those are economic. And they need to be addressed for the stability on the peninsula. And then there is one more that needs to be mentioned, which I believe is truly the future for all of us, including my own country, and that's the greater Indian Ocean area. In Arabic we say al-Bahr al-Hindi, which implies all the way from Egypt and the eastern Mediterranean, all the way to the South China Sea and to the Pacific Ocean. For 6,000 years it has been really an engine of growth for civilization. Without question, the history of the world has been very much linked to the developments in the Indian Ocean, and they are today as well. Already, more than 50% of the world's trade goes on that waterway. It's absolutely vital for today and for the future. And there's a potential today for conflict as much as cooperation there. And I believe, again, that a focus on the Indian Ocean can raise all of the countries in this region, as well as my own. So, I'm saying all this because I think it's easy to focus on the negative side of what's happening in the region. That's easy. To me, that doesn't require the level of brain power that we have in this room today. But I also believe that there is tremendous hope. And this is where I believe we can make a contribution. The next subject is regional security, in a more traditional sense. And this is very, very important that regions stand up. I think again, we see, whether you call it hegemony or whatever, the role of outside powers like the United States and the EU, which are very much focused on their own problems, will decline. In the case of Afghanistan, the initiatives taken by the government of Turkey were very much welcomed by everyone. I believe there needs to be yet another initiative coming from the region to address the Arab-Israeli issue. The United States is facing elections, and I have to be totally honest, when you have elections in America, they focus on what the American people want, and that's jobs, and that's the economy. So there is much less focus now on international problems. And they will be addressed, but not for the longer term. So this is where I believe there must be a regional initiative to revitalize the peace process, or to start a new one. The old one is virtually dead, from what I see. And I think this is time for countries in the region to stand up and say, we do not want war. We want peace, and we want stability, and how do we achieve it? Finally, again, on the United States. I have reminded audiences everywhere I've gone that there's only one country in the world that has the ability to project power anywhere, anytime, of its choosing. And that's still the United States. And countries that do not keep this in mind do so at their own peril. The United States can project power, and will do so if it feels it must. What I find amazing is that it doesn't do it even more when it can. Which brings me to the next point. The American people do not want our government to project power at this time or in the foreseeable future unless they believe it is 100% justifiable and accountable. Some of this has to do, quite frankly, with money and resources. The American people do not want our money to be spent needlessly, whether it is at home or abroad. And this is absolutely a key factor. But beyond that, there is a belief that America overextended itself, that got itself into commitments and engagements that did not promise to serve our long-term interests. So America is going to be more choosy in how it deploys its forces, and where it engages, and how it engages. But one thing for sure is, if it feels its interests are threatened, it will act. And it will act very quickly. And we need to keep that in mind. But also the fact that America is going to be more careful in its engagements also, in my view, argues for regional approaches. The United States will act if others act. So, for example, with the Istanbul process, the United States was there. and strongly supported the leadership of Turkey and the participation of the other governments. The United States will be there for a GCC solution, whether it's to Yemen or other issues. And the United States will still be there for a peace process, even if it's not leading it from the very beginning. It is looking for leadership elsewhere. There's a common saying in America now, we can't want peace more than other countries do. The countries that are most involved in the peace process or most involved in their own development must demonstrate that they want it. And then I believe the United States will be there to support it. This is indeed a time of enormous transition. And I like to also tell people that our leaders are so busy, they don't have time to think. And when I see my own leaders in Washington, I know they don't. When they, even before they get to the office, they turn on their machines, which they shouldn't be doing while they're driving, and they have 1,000 emails. And they spend all day long clearing out their emails and their inboxes and going to meetings. And they don't have the precious time that you have these next 2 days to really think. And they are depending on conferences like this, on think tanks like ours, to provide guidance and solutions. And I mean that seriously, and I think that's true for many of our countries, is they more rely on people who can think and present cogent ideas because they don't have time to do so themselves. So do not underestimate the value of this conference or other conferences that you go to. These ideas are listened to, especially if they don't just focus on the negatives. They already know that. But if they focus on creative solutions to pull our countries forward, to provide regional security, but most important, to provide economic security. That's what the people of America want. That's what I think all the young people want in the Arab world. And I think throughout our entire region, we as the older generation want a good life, a better life for our children and our children's children. And they are less patient than we are. So we have an obligation to try to provide some of these solutions. So I will end it at that, and I hope this provides you some something to think about as we go into more specifics in the next meetings. Thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. You did a marvelous job of setting the stage for the next 3 days. And by the way, I hope everyone has had a nice long look at my lovely wife and daughter through this talk here. No, I really do think that your remarks, gentlemen, set us up very well for the next 3 days of this conference. And that's what I want to get into a little bit right here, because I think substantively we've just gone through almost all of the issues that we're going to touch on for the next 3 days. But if you're anything like me, you like to know what these next 3 days are going to look like and how physically we're going to be able to address all of the issues that Ambassador Larocco and Professor Aras just raised. So very briefly, before we go on a break and begin the substantive portion of our program, I want to just go over that with you very briefly. And actually, I'm going to start that with a few logistical administrative things that Danielle gave me on a list here before this talk. First, lunch. I know we just finished breakfast, so it's a good time to think about lunch. We'll be at the very top floor in the Panorama restaurant. Okay? Second, if you have reimbursement envelopes for your visas, give them to Danielle today. Third, confirm your departure flights with Stephanie or Danielle. The vouchers this evening can be used at the restaurant here, also the Jezi Cafe and the Hachi Abdullah restaurant nearby. And most importantly, when you go to the other, we won't be in this room all the time. We will also have working groups and topic sessions. Take your name tent with you. This will be used throughout the conference, so just make sure that you take that with you everywhere you go. Okay, administrative things out of the way, back to the substance. What are we here to do? The next 3 days are divided into 3 core components. 1, plenary sessions that will take place in this room. 2nd, working groups that will take place on the -1 level, the bottom level here. And 3rd are simultaneous topic sessions. Now we'll get into what that means, each of those different components in turn. First, on the plenary sessions. These are intended to be precisely the kinds of big issues that Professor Aras and Ambassador Larocco discussed here, that affect everyone in this room and everyone outside of this room. They're going to be things like our next panel on regional economic development and integration, on the strategic implications of an emerging global system. And that includes the rise of Asia, the Arab Spring, stagnating West, and what all of that means for this region in strategic terms. And then finally, a look tomorrow at the media and technology and how those have changed and shaped statecraft today. The remarks made from the panel here, the prepared remarks, will be on the record. We have Chris Conowitz over here who's recording them so that we can put them on our YouTube channel, so that it's not just the people here who benefit from the wisdom that's spoken of at that panel, but that we can broadcast that to a wider audience. But those are only for the prepared remarks. At the when people are done speaking, when we get to the discussion and the Q&A, question and answer, I've asked Chris to take the camera down, turn it off, take it outside the room, because the discussion will be off the record, undertaken under the Chatham House rule of non-attribution. Oh, and as you can see, we've got a lot of very good speakers. Really, I just put this slide here so that we could take a moment to look at what a marvelous, handsome group of people you see here before us. And we'll see each of these folks in turn. Now, the working groups. These will also take place under the Chatham House rule, non-attribution, free-flowing discussion. Our working groups are really the heart and soul of the regional network. They are that sustained strategic interaction. This is where we do the work of the network. This is where products come out. This is where we really get to know one another and share our perspectives and ideas. I look at the working groups as idea labs, as generators. These working groups should be a benefit to you, not a burden on you. They should be what we in the US military call a force multiplier. They should be something that you can leverage to your advantage in your work, in your organizations. And whatever we can do to help you with that, please let me know, because I do want these to be of great benefit primarily to you and getting your ideas out there to the wider world. So we will do, all of the working groups will meet on the -1 level. They're all in the same area, and those will take place after lunch today and tomorrow. Finally, the topic sessions, these simultaneous topic sessions. You should know that the structure of this plenary conference was put together at a meeting of all of the network directors, the directors of member centers of the regional network in September. We all got together and had a discussion about, well, what do we want to address at this plenary conference? What are the big issues? What are the things that we are concerned about? What came out of that meeting was simply more ideas and more good things to discuss than we have time to deal with in plenary sessions. So in order to accommodate those, we're creating multiple simultaneous smaller group discussions to address some of the issues that maybe don't apply across the entire region, but apply to sub-regional elements thereof. So that's the idea there. It also gives a very good opportunity for the members of the network to share their own expertise and their ideas with each other, not just in predetermined working groups, but in these other sessions. So that's the basic structure. We will also have an opportunity for each of you, if you choose to do it, to speak to Chris and record, if you want to, an address that we can put on YouTube. If you have a topic that you want to talk about that you would like to share with the world, think of it as kind of a video op-ed. Speak to Chris and he will provide you with the opportunity to do that. So that's just something on the side that we've made available to you. So that's how we're going to do these things over the course of the next 3 days. Several plenary sessions, the working groups, and then the simultaneous topic sessions. And again, before I sort of release everyone for the much coveted coffee break, I would like to ask you to join me in thanking Professor Aras and Ambassador Larocco for setting the stage so nicely for us to be able to engage on these important strategic issues over the course of the next 2 days. So please join me in thanking them.